The mining colony on planet Kepler 442b had existed for 7 long years in complete silence and isolation from the rest of the human civilization. Captain Linda Martinez had been the leader of this settlement since its beginning, and she had dedicated her entire life to making this strange world feel like home for the 500 colonists who worked in the mines and laboratories. The days on Kepler 442b were longer than Earth days, and the sunsets were always purple and gold, creating a view that never got old no matter how many times Linda had watched them from her office window. She spent most of her days managing resources and solving problems that arose from living so far away from Earth and Earth's support systems. The colony was self-sufficient in almost every way because there was no way to call for help if something went wrong. They had learned to grow their own food in hydroponic gardens, and they had learned to repair their own equipment, and they had even learned to treat medical emergencies with the limited doctors they had available. Linda took pride in how well her team had adapted to life on this distant world. She had recruited the best people for this mission, and they had proven themselves again and again to be resourceful and brave and dedicated to their work. On this particular morning, the sky above the colony seemed darker than usual, and Linda noticed it immediately when she stepped outside for her morning inspection. The sensors on the perimeter had been picking up strange readings for the past hour, but nothing that seemed immediately threatening. Linda called her chief science officer, whose name was Rebecca Wilson, and asked her to analyze the data more carefully. Rebecca came to the observation deck with her tablet showing multiple readouts, and her face looked confused and concerned at the same time. She told Linda that the readings were showing something large approaching the colony from above, but the object was not registering on any database of known human or natural phenomena. The colonists began to gather in small groups as the news spread through the settlement that something unusual was happening. Linda could see the fear in their eyes because they all knew that anything unknown could potentially be dangerous. She wanted to calm them, but she also knew that it was important to be honest about the situation. She announced through the communication system that everyone should remain in designated shelter areas until the object could be identified and analyzed. Most people complied quickly, but some of the younger colonists lingered in the common areas, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was coming toward them. Then the object became visible in the sky, and it was nothing like anything anyone had ever seen before. It was a massive sphere made of what looked like polished metal, and it descended slowly through the purple atmosphere with a grace and control that suggested advanced technology. The sphere was easily the size of a large building, and it reflected the light of the distant star in ways that seemed almost intentional, as if it was trying to communicate through its appearance alone. Linda's heart was pounding in her chest as she watched the sphere lower itself toward the eastern landing zone that had been prepared for cargo ships many years ago. The sphere touched down with barely any sound, and for a moment everything was completely still. The wind seemed to stop blowing, and the insects that made noise in the alien forest nearby fell silent, as if they sensed something significant was happening. Then the airlock of the sphere began to open, and Linda held her breath because this was the moment that would define the rest of her life and the lives of everyone in the colony. A ramp extended downward, and a figure emerged from inside the sphere and came down toward the ground. Linda could not believe what she was seeing when the figure became clear in the light. It was not what anyone would have expected from an alien encounter. Instead of something monstrous or terrifying, a young girl stepped onto the red soil of Kepler 442b. She was tall, and her skin had a translucent blue color that seemed to glow faintly in the daylight. Her eyes were large and amber-colored, and they looked directly at the humans who were watching from behind the protective barriers. She wore a simple silvery garment that seemed to be made of a material that responded to her movements and changed shape slightly as she walked. Linda made a decision that would have seemed crazy to most people, but she decided to approach the girl alone. She removed her helmet and took off her protective suit in front of her entire security team. Her officers tried to stop her, but she walked forward anyway because her instinct told her that this girl did not pose an immediate threat. The girl watched Linda approach with what looked like relief on her strange blue face. When they were close enough to speak, Linda noticed that the girl was trembling slightly, as if she was terrified of something or someone. The girl tried to speak, but the sounds that came from her mouth were not any human language. Linda activated the universal translator that was installed in her wrist device, and suddenly, the girl's words became clear. The girl introduced herself as Zara, and she explained that she had come from a civilization called the Vessels of Andromeda. She said that she had traveled for many years through space to reach this colony, because she had heard that humans were different from other species in the galaxy. Zara said that humans had something called compassion and acceptance, and she desperately needed to find people who possessed these qualities. Linda felt an immediate connection to this young alien girl, and she could sense the desperation and loneliness in Zara's voice. She asked the girl what had happened to her and why she had come so far from her own people. Zara's amber eyes began to leak a glowing liquid that seemed to be tears, and she explained that she was considered defective by her own civilization because she felt emotions too deeply, and she refused to follow the strict rules that her people had established. She had been told that she could never be a productive member of her society and that she would never be accepted or valued by her own kind. Zara said that she had stolen a spacecraft and escaped from her people, and she had traveled through the vast emptiness of space searching for a place where she could be accepted for who she was. She had picked up signals from the Kepler colony, and she had hoped that humans might be different and might be willing to help an outcast like her. Linda reached out and gently touched Zara's arm, and she felt the warmth of the girl's skin and the reality of her fear and her hope. In that moment, Linda knew that her life was about to change forever in ways she could not yet imagine. Linda made a decision that was not popular with many of the other colonists, but she decided that Zara could stay at the settlement, at least until they figured out what to do with her. The colony council met late into the night and debated back and forth about whether it was safe to allow an alien to live among them. Some people argued that Zara could be a spy or a threat to the entire human settlement. Others pointed out that she had arrived in peace and had made no aggressive moves toward anyone. Linda spoke passionately about giving Zara a chance and about the importance of showing compassion to someone who was clearly suffering and desperate for help. And the end, the vote was close, but the council decided to allow Zara to stay in the colony under careful observation. Linda was assigned as her primary guardian and caretaker because she was the one who had made the connection with the alien girl first. Linda set up a living space for Zara in the guest quarters near her own residence so that she could keep watch on her and help her adjust to life among humans. She brought Zara clothing and items that might make her comfortable, and she spent the first night simply talking to her about Earth and about human culture and about what life was like in a place with so much variety and difference. Zara was a quick learner, and her intelligence seemed to operate on a level that was far beyond normal human capability. Within just a few days, she was speaking English with a strange but beautiful accent, and she understood most of the basic concepts about human society. She asked endless questions about everything from why humans needed to sleep to why they experienced emotions so intensely. Linda found herself enjoying these conversations, and she realized that she was beginning to care deeply about this strange alien girl who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly. The other colonists began to interact with Zara in different ways, and their reactions varied greatly. Some people were frightened of her and tried to avoid her whenever possible. Others were curious and wanted to learn about her species and her civilization. A few colonists were kind to her and tried to make her feel welcome in the settlement. Zara seemed to absorb all of this attention like a plant absorbing sunlight, and she became more confident in herself as days passed. She began to participate in the daily activities of the colony, and she proved to be incredibly intelligent when she was assigned to work in the laboratory with the scientists. The scientists quickly realized that Zara possessed knowledge about physics and chemistry and biology that was centuries ahead of human understanding. She could explain concepts that human scientists had been struggling with for decades, and she could solve problems that had seemed impossible to solve before. The head of the laboratory, named Sarah Mitchell, became fascinated with Zara, and she began to spend hours each day learning from the alien girl. Sarah found that Zara was not just intelligent but also genuinely interested in sharing her knowledge and in helping humans advance their understanding of the universe. Meanwhile, Linda was experiencing something different with Zara in her personal time. Linda had lost her own daughter in a terrible accident many years ago when she was still living on Earth. Her daughter had been playing near a traffic intersection when a vehicle had struck her, and she had died before the ambulance could arrive at the hospital. Linda had never fully recovered from this loss, and she had thrown herself into her work to escape the pain and the guilt and the overwhelming sadness that came with losing a child. When Zara came into her life, Linda found herself relating to the alien girl on a level that was deeply personal and emotional. She began to see her lost daughter in Zara's eyes and in her desperate need for affection and acceptance. She started spending her evenings telling Zara stories about Earth and about her own family, and about the things she loved about being alive. Zara would listen with complete attention, and she would ask thoughtful questions that showed she understood the emotions behind the stories. Linda found that she was smiling more often and laughing more often, and feeling less of the heavy weight of grief that had followed her into space. One evening, Linda was showing Zara photographs from her tablet when Zara asked a question that made Linda's heart stop. Zara asked if Linda had ever had a child, and if Linda knew what it felt like to be a mother. Linda hesitated before answering because talking about her daughter was still difficult, even after all these years. But she decided to be honest with Zara, and she told her about her daughter and about the accident and about how much she had missed being a mother to someone. Tears ran down Linda's face as she spoke, and Zara reached out and gently took her hand with her four-fingered grip. Zara said something that Linda would never forget for the rest of her life. Zara said that she did not have memories of her own mother caring for her, because Zara's people did not form such attachments. Zara said that she had always wondered what it felt like to have someone care about you so deeply that they would risk everything to protect you. Zara asked if Linda would consider being her mother not just her guardian, but her actual mother in the way that Linda had been mother to her own biological daughter. Linda was speechless for a long moment, and then she pulled Zara close to her and held her tightly, and both of them cried together in the darkness of the quarters. From that night forward, something fundamental changed in the relationship between Linda and Zara. It was no longer just a situation of a human taking care of an alien. It had become something much deeper and much more real and much more genuine. It had become a true family relationship, and Linda began to call Zara her daughter and Zara began to call Linda her mother. The colony began to notice the change and slowly began to accept Zara more fully because they could see how genuine and how beautiful this relationship had become. The feared alien visitor had transformed into something that made the entire colony understand the power of love and acceptance, and the possibility of family transcending species and biology. Months passed and Zara became an integral part of the Kepler colony, in ways that nobody could have predicted. She continued to work in the laboratory where her scientific expertise was invaluable to the research projects that the colony was undertaking. She helped develop new methods for extracting minerals from the planet's crust, and she improved the efficiency of the power generation systems by explaining principles of physics that human engineers had never understood before. But more importantly, Zara had become woven into the social fabric of the entire settlement, and she had developed genuine friendships with many of the colonists. Linda watched her daughter grow and adapt to human life with a mixture of pride and joy that filled her heart in ways she had never expected. She taught Zara how to cook human food even though Zara did not technically need to eat the way humans did. But Zara wanted to experience everything that human life had to offer, and she found that cooking and sharing meals was a way of connecting with her new family and community. They spent evenings in the small kitchen preparing dinner together, and Linda taught Zara old recipes that she remembered from her childhood on Earth. Zara also became interested in human art and music and culture, and she spent hours listening to recordings of Earth music and watching films and reading books from the human archive. She would often sit with Linda, and they would watch old movies together, and Zara would ask questions about why humans told stories and created art and made music. Linda tried to explain that these things were ways for humans to express emotions and to connect with each other, and to make meaning out of their existence. Zara said that she was beginning to understand why her own people thought she was defective, because her capacity to appreciate and to feel moved by these things was so strong that it overwhelmed her sometimes. The colonists began to organize social events that included Zara, and these gatherings became some of the most meaningful times in the colony's calendar. There was a celebration held for the new year, where all the colonists gathered together to reflect on the past and to hope for the future. Zara participated fully in these celebrations, and she shared stories about the festivals of her own people. She talked about the vessels of Andromeda and about her childhood before she was deemed defective and cast out. She spoke about missing parts of her old life, even though her old life had rejected her, because that was the complexity of human emotion that she was learning to experience and understand. One day, Rebecca Wilson, the chief science officer, came to Linda with a discovery that changed everything about how they understood Zara and her people. Rebecca had been analyzing some of the technology that Zara had brought with her in her spacecraft, and she had found something remarkable in the data storage systems. There were recordings and documents from Zara's civilization, and they told a very different story than what Zara had been told about herself. The documents showed that Zara had not actually been cast out because she was defective, but because she had refused to participate in a program that her people called the standardization. Rebecca explained that the standardization was a process by which all individuals in Zara's civilization were modified to suppress emotional responses and to conform to rigid behavioral patterns. Zara had refused to undergo this process when she was of the age that all young people were required to go through it. She had argued that emotions were valuable and that they should be preserved rather than suppressed. This act of rebellion had been viewed as a threat to the social order of her people, and so they had decided to exile her rather than allow her to continue to challenge their systems. Linda felt a surge of anger toward Zara's people when she learned this truth, but she also felt a profound admiration for her daughter. Zara had sacrificed everything about her life and her family and her home because she believed that emotions and individuality were worth preserving. She had chosen to be cast out rather than become someone that she felt was not truly herself. When Linda told Zara about what Rebecca had discovered, Zara wept openly, and she said that she had known in her heart that her people did not understand her, but she had not known until now that they had simply rejected her for valuing the things that made her different. This revelation brought Linda and Zara even closer together because Linda now fully understood the sacrifice that her daughter had made to find a place where she could be accepted and loved. She held Zara and told her that she would never have to face rejection or abandonment ever again, because she had a family now, and family meant forever. Linda promised that no matter what happened in the future, she would stand by Zara and protect her and love her unconditionally. The colony became protective of Zara after learning her story, and the colonists began to see her as someone incredibly brave rather than someone strange or dangerous. Young people in the colony looked up to Zara and asked her for advice about their own lives and their own struggles with fitting in and finding their place. Zara became a mentor and a friend to many colonists, and she helped them understand their own emotions and their own value as individuals. She taught them that being different was not a flaw but a strength, and that uniqueness should be celebrated rather than suppressed. Linda watched her daughter flourish in this community of acceptance, and she felt gratitude every single day for the turn of events that had brought Zara into her life. She had come to Kepler 442b as a broken person, still grieving the loss of her child, and still carrying wounds that she had thought would never heal. Zara had healed those wounds not by replacing what Linda had lost, but by showing Linda that love and connection were possible in forms and shapes that Linda had never imagined. Together, they had created something beautiful and meaningful and real, and that was the greatest gift that either of them could have given to the other. The peace that had settled over the colony in the months following Zara's arrival was the kind of peace that seemed too good to last, and Linda found herself sometimes lying awake at night wondering when it would shatter. She had learned in her long life that good things often came with a price, and that happiness was usually temporary. She tried not to let these dark thoughts interfere with her enjoyment of the present moment, but there was a part of her that remained vigilant and worried about what the future might bring. Her worries proved to be justified when the colony's communication system picked up a signal from deep space. It was a transmission that was coded in a language that was not human, but the universal translator was able to decode it, and the message it contained was chilling. The message came from a fleet of ships that identified themselves as the vessels of Andromeda, and it carried a threat so serious that it made Linda's blood turn to ice. The message stated that a stolen vessel had been detected on the planet Kepler 442b, and that all humans harboring the vessel and its occupant would face immediate destruction of their settlement. Linda called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council, and she explained the situation to them. The council members looked at each other with fear and concern, because they all understood what this message meant. Zara's people had finally located her, and they were demanding her return or they would wipe out the entire human settlement. The reaction from the council was immediate and severe. Some members demanded that Zara be immediately expelled from the colony, or handed over to her people to save the rest of them. Others argued that such an action would be a betrayal of everything they claimed to believe in regarding compassion and acceptance. The debate raged for hours, and tempers became heated as fear overtook rational thinking. Some colonists had lost everything to build this settlement, and they were not willing to lose it for an alien girl no matter how much they had come to care for her. Others argued that if they surrendered Zara, then they would become murderers because they would be condemning her to death or worse at the hands of her own people. Linda listened to both sides, and she felt torn in ways that were almost physically painful. She was the leader of this colony, and her decisions affected the lives of 500 people, but Zara was her daughter and she could not betray her own child. Rebecca Wilson was the first to speak in favor of defending Zara, and she made an argument that was so powerful that it shifted the tone of the entire debate. Rebecca said that if they handed over Zara, then they would be proving that her people were right about her being defective and wrong and worthy of exile. Rebecca said that they would be confirming that emotions and individuality and courage were weaknesses rather than strengths. She said that humanity had always claimed to value certain principles, and now was the time to prove that those principles meant something, real and not just convenient words that they used when circumstances were easy. Sarah Mitchell, the head of the laboratory, also spoke, and she said that Zara's scientific contributions alone justified protecting her because her knowledge could advance human civilization by decades, if not centuries. But she said that even beyond the scientific value, Zara was a person who deserved to be protected and valued. Sarah said that she had never believed in judging people by their origin or their appearance, and Zara's origin happened to be from another world, but that did not make her any less worthy of protection and love. The colonists began to nod in agreement, and the tone of the meeting shifted from fear to determination. Linda finally spoke, and her voice carried the weight of her authority and her emotion. She said that she had made a promise to Zara that she would never face rejection or abandonment again, and that she intended to keep that promise. She said that Zara had shown them all what it meant to choose acceptance over conformity and courage over safety. Linda said that they had a chance to prove that humanity was different from Zara's people in a way that was positive, and that they were willing to stand up for their principles even when it was difficult and dangerous to do so. The vote was called, and this time it was almost unanimous. Only 3 colonists voted in favor of surrendering Zara, and they left the meeting in shame because they understood that they had lost the moral argument even if they had won the survival argument. The Colony Council decided that they would send a message back to the vessels of Andromeda, stating firmly that Zara was now a member of the human colony, and that she would not be returned or handed over to anyone. They prepared their defenses, and they made plans for what they would do if the alien ships attacked. But before they could send the message, Zara learned what had happened, and she made a decision of her own. She went to the shuttle bay late at night and began to prepare the smallest spacecraft that was available for launch. She had decided that she could not allow her mother and her colony to be destroyed because of her presence. She thought that if she returned to her people, then perhaps they would be satisfied, and they would leave the humans alone. She left a note for Linda explaining her reasoning, and she prepared to sacrifice herself to save the people she loved. Linda found the note on her desk the next morning, and her heart nearly stopped when she realized what Zara was planning to do. She ran as fast as she could to the shuttle bay and found Zara in the pilot's seat, going through the launch sequence. Linda burst through the airlock, and she grabbed Zara, and she pulled her away from the controls with a strength that came from pure desperation and love and refusal to lose her daughter. Linda held Zara tightly, and she told her that she would not allow her to make this sacrifice because Zara's life had value and meaning and purpose beyond just being a solution to a conflict between civilizations. The final days before the deadline arrived like a storm approaching on the horizon. Linda held Zara close to her and made promises that she intended to keep no matter what the cost might be. She told Zara that they were a family now, and that family meant forever, and that nothing and nobody could tear them apart. Zara held her mother tightly, and she finally allowed herself to believe that maybe she was not defective, and maybe she was not wrong for feeling emotions so deeply. Maybe she was special and valuable and worthy of protection just the way she was. The colony prepared for the possibility of an attack, and the engineers worked around the clock to improve the defensive systems. They had very limited weapons compared to what an advanced alien civilization would possess, but they did what they could to make the settlement harder to destroy. The colonists organized themselves into teams, and everyone knew what their role would be if the Andromeda ships attacked. There was a sense of unity and purpose that Linda had never felt before in the entire time she had been leading this settlement. The final communication was sent to the vessels of Andromeda, and it carried Linda's voice. She spoke directly to whoever was leading the alien fleet, and she told them that Zara was now a member of the human colony and a valued member of the human family. Linda said that humans had traveled across vast distances to build a civilization based on principles of acceptance and compassion, and those principles were not negotiable. She said that they would defend Zara to the last person and the last breath they had, because that was what family meant. The message was bold and probably foolish, but Linda no longer cared about foolishness when the survival of her daughter was at stake. Then something unexpected happened that none of them could have predicted. The Andromeda fleet did not attack, but instead sent a single small shuttle down to the surface of the planet. The shuttle landed in the same location where Zara's original ship had arrived, and everyone held their breath waiting to see what would emerge. The airlock opened and a figure stepped out onto the red soil, and everyone gasped, because it was an alien who looked remarkably similar to Zara, but older and with silver streaks running through her blue skin. This was Zara's grandmother, and she had come alone to see what her granddaughter had become among the humans. Linda watched as Zara rushed toward her grandmother with a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. The elder alien watched silently as Zara approached, and when they finally stood face to face, the grandmother reached out and gently touched Zara's face with her four-fingered hand. No words were spoken between them in that moment, but Linda could see that something profound was happening as the grandmother studied her granddaughter carefully. After several minutes, the grandmother turned and looked at Linda, and she approached the human woman with measured steps. The grandmother said words that were translated by the universal device, and they were simple, but they carried enormous weight. The grandmother said that Zara looked happy, and that she had never seen such peace and contentment in her granddaughter's eyes before. She said that she wanted to understand what had happened to Zara in this place and how humans could have given her something that her own people could not provide. Linda invited the grandmother into the colony, and she spent 3 hours showing her everything that Zara had built in the settlement. She showed her the laboratory where Zara did her scientific work, and she showed her the home that Linda and Zara shared together. She introduced her to the colonists who had come to love Zara and who could speak to her character and her value to their community. Most importantly, she showed the grandmother how her granddaughter was treated with respect and kindness, and how Zara's differences were celebrated rather than criticized. The grandmother watched everything with what seemed to be astonishment and confusion, as if she was seeing something that her own civilization had forgotten long ago. When they returned to the settlement hub, the grandmother asked Linda a question that seemed simple, but was actually quite profound. She asked what Linda called Zara, and how they defined their relationship to each other. Linda took a deep breath, and she said that Zara was her daughter, and that they were family, and that nothing could ever change that. The grandmother was silent for a long moment, and then she nodded slowly as if she understood something very important. The grandmother transmitted a new message to the vessels of Andromeda fleet, and Linda waited anxiously to hear what would happen. The message stated that the exile of Zara had been a mistake made by those who could not understand that emotions and individuality were strengths and not weaknesses. The message said that Zara had found a place where she was accepted and loved, and that any attempt to harm this settlement or reclaim Zara would be a violation of the grandmother's authority as an elder of the Andromeda civilization. The fleet powered down their weapons and withdrew from the colony's airspace, and it became clear that they were no longer a threat. Zara collapsed to her knees and wept, and Linda held her and wept with her, because they had faced the possibility of losing everything, and they had survived. The grandmother helped them both to their feet, and she said that she wanted to stay on Kepler 442b for a time so that she could learn about this human civilization and understand what had changed her granddaughter so profoundly. She said that perhaps her people had much to learn from humans, and that perhaps the time had come for the two civilizations to begin a dialogue about acceptance and change. In the weeks that followed, the grandmother became an ambassador between the humans and the Andromeda fleet. She sent back detailed reports about the human colony and about how an alien girl had found love and family among creatures who were different from herself. These reports began to shift the thinking of the Andromeda civilization, and slowly they began to understand that perhaps they had been wrong about what was defective and what was strong. The grandmother told everyone that Zara had been right all along, and that her people had made a terrible mistake in trying to suppress emotions and individuality. Linda and Zara were officially married in a ceremony that was recognized by both human and alien law, and Zara became Linda's legal daughter and heir. They built a life together that was filled with love and purpose and meaning, and they became a symbol to both civilizations of what was possible when acceptance and compassion conquered fear and rigidity. The colony on Kepler 442b became a place where humans and aliens worked together and learned from each other, and proved that family transcended biology and species and origin. The story of Zara and Linda became known throughout human space and throughout the Andromeda civilization as a tale of love conquering all obstacles and of the power of family to transform the universe.